I close 3 nights a week at the co-op in Millersfield, which is a fancy way of saying I ring up bags of feed and sell mineral blocks, while the big guys in seed caps talk weather like it's politics. That night had been slow and wet. The kind of rain that doesn't bother to fall. It just hangs in the air and lets you drive through it. I left a little after 9 with the smell of cracked corn still in my hair and the taste of burnt coffee glued to my tongue. My old Corolla, a stubborn silver box with one working speaker and a sticky fuel gauge, clicked and sighed as I buckled in. I set the radio low so I could hear the road. I like hearing the road out there. The way the tires hum on the 2-lane blacktop and the reflectors blink at you like tired eyes. County 17 runs out of town past the shuttered drive-in, past the wheat, past a single white church that keeps its signboard funny. God's Wi-Fi password is prayer. And then there's nothing but fields and irrigation rigs and the occasional barn like a ship marooned in stubble. If you drive it enough, you know where the shoulders slump, where the wind shoves, where a deer once tried out your bumper. It's an old habit of mine to narrate it back to myself, like a bedtime story you're trying to keep true. Here's the low spot where the ditch holds water. There's the S-curve that'll bite if you come in hot. That night I kept under 60 because the mist was thick and my wipers smeared more than they cleared. A mile past the church, a truck came the other way with its high beams up. They swung past and I blinked against the afterimage, that blue-white sheet that lives in your eyes for a few seconds. Then I saw it, a wash of color behind me, red first, then blue, then both together, and a bright white that bounced off every raindrop like confetti. The road ahead was empty and flat. I took my foot off the gas. The lights didn't scream. There was no siren, just the rabbit pulse of color. I checked the mirror, then the shoulder. No traffic. I slid onto the gravel apron, put on my hazards, shifted to park and waited, chest doing that little drum roll it always does even when you know you've done nothing wrong. He sat back there for a long beat with the lights spinning. The rain made halos out of them. Tossed them into the weeds, smeared them across my back window. I remember thinking that the car behind me looked wrong and not knowing why yet, like noticing a face in line that's somehow off. Then the driver door opened. A shape stood heavy at the shoulders and the flashlight clicked on. The beam jittered across my mirror and I flinched away. I rolled the window down halfway because my dad drilled that into me when I started driving. Halfway, not all the way. "Evening," a voice said. He came up close enough that the cone of light filled the car like fog. He wore a uniform. Dark rain beads clung to it and a badge pinned high. He angled the flashlight so I squinted but couldn't see him well. "License and registration." "Sure," I said, and felt stupid for how squeaky it came out. I reached for the glove box slow, elbows careful the way you do. Papers slid forward in a damp, papery wave. The insurance card I needed was stuck to an expired one. The flashlight swung to my hands like it was curious. He didn't lean in. He stood just off the window as if the rain was a wall between us. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked. No, I said. "I wasn't speeding." "Headlights low," he said. "And you crossed the center twice." "Have you been drinking?" "No. Where are you coming from?" "Work." I handed him the insurance and my license. He didn't take them. The light stayed on my fingers. "Sir?" I said, confused, and made the mistake of looking up at his badge. If you grew up around here, you know county badges like you know church logos. There are eagles and stars and little scrolls of Latin that say pain dressed up as law. His badge had the shape of it, the outline, the weight, but nothing in the middle. It was a blank metal puddle, like something stamped wrong and never inked. The little number on the bottom was just a shallow scratch. I thought maybe the glare was tricking me, that the rain was breaking the light into something flat. "Could you step out of the vehicle, ma'am?" he said. He said ma'am, the way a teacher says it before writing your name on the board. "Something wrong?" I asked. I tried to glance past him toward the car, and that's when I realized what was wrong with the silhouette. The bar of lights where a light bar should be was inside, pressed up against the glass like a fish tank. No antenna on the trunk, no number on the side. And when the flashlight skated across the bumper, the spot where the license plate should have been was a bland, toothless mouth. No plate, nothing. My scalp prickled. I felt the seatbelt like a rope around me and forced my voice to be steady. "I'm happy to pull ahead to a gas station," I said. "Or the sheriff's office. I get nervous out here." "Step out of the vehicle," he said. Each word a little island. "I'd like to call 911 and verify," I said, and my hands were already on my phone. which sat face down by the gear shift like a sleeping thing. His flashlight burned across my knuckles. "You don't want to do that," he said. And the words were soft and close enough that for a second I thought he'd leaned into the window. But he hadn't moved. The rain sheeted and hissed in the ditches. Somewhere far off, water ticked against an irrigation pivot. I tapped the screen anyway. 1 bar, then nothing, then 1. I hit call and put it on speaker and laid it on my thigh because touching it to my ear felt like it would make me blind in the one eye I needed. It rang once, twice, a third time. Every ring felt like a seatbelt click. On the fourth it answered, and I could have cried from the simple human sound of the operator. "What is your emergency?" "Hi," I said, and I heard my own voice like it belonged to a friend who sounded braver. "I'm on County 17 just past the white church. There are police lights behind me, but I'm not sure it's a police car. I don't see a license plate. The officer's asking me to step out." "Stay on the line," she said. "What's your name?" "Evelyn." "Okay, Evelyn, keep your doors locked. Can you describe the vehicle behind you?" I tried, but the flashlight swung again. And the man, he was very still, said, "Ma'am, end that call right now or I'll cite you for obstruction." "Evelyn," the operator said in my lap, calm as rain, "we do not have a unit on County 17. There is a deputy clearing a domestic on 9, but no traffic stops assigned. Keep your car in park." "Are your windows up?" "Half," I said. "Roll it up." "Do it now." I raised the window. The inch it took to meet the rubber might as well have been a mile. His face, if I had to guess his shape in the rain, did not lean down to look at me. He stood so his flashlight did all the looking. "Ma'am, you're making a big mistake." "My dad's a mistake like that," I heard myself say. And it was a stupid defensive lie, but the operator said, "Good. Keep talking to me." And that was enough permission to keep words between me and whatever waited in the cold. "Evelyn," the operator said, "can you drive to the Millersfield Cenex? It's 3.5 miles ahead on your right. Lights will be on. I'll have real units meet you there. When I say go, go. Don't speed. Don't panic. Just drive." The man outside shifted his weight and the beam trembled. He tapped the glass twice with 2 knuckles like a neighbor. "Last chance," he said. "Go," the operator said in my lap. I put it in drive. My foot wanted to slam the pedal to the floor and make the car leap, but I eased forward, tires ticking onto the blacktop, hazard lights stuttering. The red and blue behind me brightened, then fell into a steady, thoughtful distance. He didn't gun it. He didn't even use a siren. He followed like a shadow that had decided it was tired of the ground. "You're doing great," the operator said, and she didn't sound like she was reading a script. I clung to her voice as the fields fell away, as the ditches pooled, as the cat's eye reflectors blinked their metronome. The mist turned the world into a diorama. Every mailbox was a person. Every person's face was blank. At the mile marker with the bullet hole, the lights behind me flared so bright that the road disappeared. My hands tightened on the wheel until the tendons in my thumbs sang. He drifted close like he might bump me. A whisper of pressure. A nudge, my trunk twitched. I said a word I don't say around my grandma. He backed off again, smooth as if pulled by a string. The operator asked me what I saw. I told her about the missing plate, the light bar inside the glass, the blank badge. She didn't say, "Oh God," but I heard it anyway in the breath she didn't take. 2 miles, she said. "Any cross streets?" "There's the farm road at the Miller place," I said. "There's a silo with a red cap." "Good, keep steady." He came up again, and this time his driver's side door opened while his car was still rolling. I glimpsed it in the mirror. A dark triangle in the rain, a space that felt wrong. A second later it clicked shut. Maybe he'd tried it like a hand testing a lock. My mind did a strange thing then. It went to the little stupid details you store just so you can feel that something is normal. My left shoe heel was damp. There was a corn kernel stuck under my seat from some spill weeks before, and a single strand of my hair kept floating in front of my eye, and I couldn't spare a hand to move it. I think that was my brain trying to keep me alive by pretending life would continue. 1 mile, the operator said. "You'll see the Cenex sign through the trees." He surged toward me. This time the touch wasn't a whisper. My bumper jolted and the Corolla bucked, and for half a second the tail wanted to come out and slide. I feathered it back and held. He fell away. I saw very clearly in the mirror the absolute emptiness where a plate should have been. It was like looking at a mouth with all the teeth pulled, clean, wrong, raw. "I'm almost there," I said. "Please be there." "You're not alone," she said, and it sounded like a promise someone had been waiting to keep. The Cenex rose out of the mist in a lozenge of white light. 2 pumps. A Pepsi machine that always eats an extra $50. Windows by the door barred against the kind of crime that never visits. The sign threw blue onto the wet asphalt. I felt more naked, not less, the instant I crossed into the light. Park by the door, the operator said. Leave your lights on. Do not shut off the engine. I did. For a half second, the world was only the tick of my engine and the steady breath of the pump's refrigeration. The fake cruiser idled behind me 10 yards out. Its lights didn't wash the storefront. It hung at the edge like it didn't like bright places. Another set of lights approached. No color, just bright halogens, and the shape of a real county SUV shouldered up beside the pumps. A second followed a heartbeat later. A deputy got out fast enough to show me that training is just speed you earn. He held his hand at me, palm down, stay low, and then turned his head toward the shadow beyond my trunk. His other hand hovered over his holster. His mouth moved. I couldn't hear the words. Rain made a curtain between us and the world beyond the canopy. The fake car's lights cut. The silhouette folded into darkness like a trick. Stay in the vehicle, the deputy shouted, and the PA on his unit made the air buzz. The second deputy flanked wide. The shadow at the edge reversed, a clean, calm movement. And then the taillights were just darker rectangles inside a darker field. And then there was nothing at all. Just the smear of tire tracks entering the mist like 2 pencil lines that decided not to be there anymore. They checked on me the way you check horses after a storm. Brief, competent, eyes on the horizon while hands move close. The operator's voice in my lap asked if I was okay, and I realized I'd been holding the phone like a life preserver even after the deputy had opened my door. Someone inside the station turned on more lights. Someone else shut off the vending machine because its thunk sounded too much like a door closing again. We made a little island of calm. The deputies, Hernandez and Cross according to their real scuffed, very specific nameplates, asked their questions, and every answer I gave produced another look between them. A look I recognized from funerals where the people in uniform know something they cannot fix with a casserole. They took my statement. They said the word impersonator and the word attempt in the phrase other counties. They said I'd done the right thing, which is adult for you didn't die tonight. They followed me home. I left my porch light on and my living room lights and the hall light and even the kitchen light that buzzes like a bee trapped in a jar. After the door locked, after the sound of the county SUVs faded into the quiet black, the house felt too dry, too bright. The rain kept dripping from the maple like time had slowed down, and then decided to fall in pieces. I showered with the door open and then I sat on the edge of my bed, with the towel wrapped around my hair and stared at the space under my bedroom door like a child telling herself that doors work like bones in the morning. I saw it on my rear bumper where his nudge had kissed. Not a dent exactly, a smear. A chalky arc like someone had pressed the curving edge of a plate against the paint and then dragged it an inch. 2 faint black circles beside it, perfectly spaced. Like suction cups had been there once. I took the Corolla to the body shop because that's what you do when something bad touches something you own. You try to erase the fingerprint. The man there bent down and ran his thumb over the mark. He didn't look at me when he said, "Been seeing more of that." He said it the way people say ticks are bad this year, or the river ran high. He offered to buff it out. I told him to leave it. For a week I drove into town the long way, keeping to the highway where there were other cars to witness how foolish I can be. Open miles made me twitchy. Closed ones made me claustrophobic. I learned where I had 1 bar and where I had 3. I learned the specific way my breath fogs glass when I'm trying not to breathe loud. Every light in my house remembered my touch. The sound of a knuckle on glass in a movie made my heart punch my ribs with a metal sound. A few nights later, I found something tucked under my Corolla's wiper, a fold of paper gone soft with mist. It wasn't a ticket. It looked like one, though, with little lines and boxes and a watermark that tried very hard. In the space for issuing agency, there was nothing. In the space for violation, someone had written, in a neat, careful hand, failure to comply. Below that, in the box where the amount due should go, there was only a time. 9:13 p.m. When I showed the deputies, they took it away with the kind of gentleness you use for nests and bombs. Hernandez asked if anyone else had a key to my place. I told him no, but I couldn't find the word that lives between no and no one. Cross asked if I'd noticed anyone new in town. The truth is, you don't notice new people here. You notice cars. You notice lights in rear views. You notice blank spaces where there should be plates. Sometimes now on the way home, I see a reflection flare in the ditch water and my body does the whole drill without me. Hazards, phone, eyes on the plate. Sometimes the light is a farm truck turning into its gravel, and sometimes it's my own brain catching on the idea of color. Once, last week, it was neither. Once it was just a quick breath of red, then blue, then nothing, waiting in a stand of trees that have no business knowing my name. I could leave. People say that when they love you. Come stay with us. Take a break. But the thing about roads is that they put their hands on you while you're not looking, and then your feet grow to fit their shoes. Besides, leaving only makes a new stretch of blacktop where the world can go quiet and the lights can bloom, and someone can step out into the rain and tap, so very politely, on your window. I keep the mark on my bumper where I can see it. It looks like a smile that forgot how. There are nights when I swear I hear a radio in the fields. Not words. Not even static. Just that clipped throat-clearing sound someone makes before they speak into a microphone. I remind myself that frogs can sound like men if you let your fear teach you. I tell myself the Cenex is still there, and the sign still throws its blue and white, and the vending machine still eats the extra $50. And I picture a badge with no face where a face should be. A badge I could put my thumb into and never touch bottom. When people ask what to do, I say the thing the operator said to me. The only true sentence that matters on a wet two-lane where the fields are empty and the night is full. You're not alone. Then I tell them to drive into the light and not look back. Not even once, because some faces are made of reflection and some names are written in the rain. And if I catch a breath of color behind me, if a shadow opens its door while it rolls, I keep my window up and my hands where he can see them. And I tell myself that the road loves me enough to remember me in the morning. I tell myself that. I don't always believe it, but I say it out loud, over the hum of the tires, like a prayer my town forgot to put on the sign. I was 2 hours into a long, flat stretch of Texas where the wind had nothing to catch, and the radio turned into a blanket of static between ranch stations. My boy Eli had kicked off his shoes and tucked his socked feet under him, the way kids do when they forget their legs were meant for walking. We'd eaten jerky from the convenience store in Van Horn and split a bottle of orange soda that tasted like melted traffic cones. It wasn't a special trip, just a father hauling his son to El Paso for the weekend because the house had felt tight lately. Because my ex said I needed to be more present. Because sometimes a long road and a horizon you can't reach is the only thing that makes you believe you might. Dusk in the desert is a legal fiction. It doesn't happen evenly. The light folds in strange places while the rest of the world still pretends it's day. Out here, the creosote smells like someone opened a jar of pennies, and the heat comes up from the asphalt even after the sun has slipped behind that distant serrated line of mountains. My old Silverado hummed steady. Eli was telling me about a video game with a cowboy who could fish and rob trains in the same afternoon. I told him that was poor time management. He laughed that clean 12-year-old laugh and tapped the plastic bottle against his knee like a metronome. We saw the lights before we saw the car, blue and red stuttering up from a dip in the highway ahead. I let off the gas instinctively. Out here, you obey lights. I scanned my speed. 68 and a 75. Not worth a stop, but the lights weren't aimed at us. They were half-hooded like the top bar had slipped. The SUV came up slow from the low spot and settled onto the shoulder in front of us. Then I realized it wasn't pulling someone else over. It was flagging me down. Uh-oh, Eli said, grinning like this was an adventure. You gonna get busted, Dad? Not if I can help it, I said, though a tightness had already gathered behind my ribs. I signaled and eased onto the gravel, which hissed and popped under the tires. The SUV stopped a few car lengths ahead at an angle, forward tilted like a dog bracing to lunge. It had a black push bar, a utility rack, and that pattern of reflective squares that says official without saying exactly who. The rear window wore the ghost of a seal, but the dusk made everything unsure. I rolled down my window and listened. The wind carried the faint click of insects, the thinning roar of my engine fan, and the resting chuff of the other vehicle. The door of the SUV opened, and the man who stepped out had the shape you'd expect. Tall, lean under a tan uniform with a wide-brim hat. He didn't stroll so much as stride, one hand at his hip. When he came close enough for me to see his face, the hat brim kept his eyes in shade. I told myself that was why I couldn't make out the badge either. Light tricks. Twice-a-day desert magic. "How you doing this evening, sir?" he said, voice pitched low and friendly. Folksy almost. "Where you coming from?" "Van Horn," I said. "Headed to El Paso." He nodded like he'd known that already. "Mind rolling your window down a little more?" It was already down halfway. I thumbed the switch. The air was dry and cooler now, the kind of cool that starts in the nostrils and works inward. Up close, I saw his uniform didn't have the crispness you see on troopers. The stitching at the shoulder had a furry edge. The nameplate was there, but it was too shiny, like a toy. I registered all that in a scatter of fast sense memory the way you do when your body's already making up its mind before you have. "Everything okay?" I said. I wasn't speeding. He angled his head toward Eli. "Who's this young man?" "My son." "Good," he said, like that pleased him. "We're doing sobriety checks on this stretch. Had a father hit a ditch last week. Son was in the front seat. Wasn't pretty. Do you mind stepping out for a quick test, partner?" I was ready to move. Your body starts doing the compliance dance before your brain votes, but the word snagged. "Partner. My brother-in-law says it, and he's a contractor. Cops say sir or they say nothing." I looked at the SUV again. The license plate had a thin metal frame around it with a slogan I couldn't read. There wasn't a radar unit on the dash that I could see. The light bar had a hairline crack in it. Behind the front seat on the passenger side, something white leaned against the glass. A water cooler or a bucket. My mouth went dry in a way that had nothing to do with heat. "Eli," I said, still looking ahead, "lock your door." He clicked the button and looked at me with wide alarm that he tried to hide because boys are always auditioning for manhood. The man tilted his hat as if greeting a neighbor. "All good, partner. Just step on out. We'll make it quick. And then I'd like to have your boy step out too." "For what?" I asked, and I heard my voice come out funny, light and flat as a page. "Same test," he said. "We want to make sure everyone's safe." "My son isn't driving," I said. "Sometimes it's the observer who notices impairment best," he said smoothly. "We asked them to follow a finger. Nothing scary. You want him safe, don't you?" I looked at Eli, who was staring at the man now with that obedient, polite fear kids reserve for adults in uniforms. I thought of my ex, the way she always says I'm too soft in discipline and too hard in judgment. I thought of the dip in the road behind us and how the SUV had been waiting in it, lights off until we were near. I thought of how the man had approached without touching his radio, without doing that little shoulder press you see. I thought of the way the word partner had hung there, mislabeled. "I'm not comfortable with that," I said.
"How about you run my info?"
"I can hand you my license." He smiled, but it thinned, the way a picture loses quality when you zoom. "This isn't optional, partner." The wind pushed a loose strip of my inspection sticker against the windshield with a papery scrape. Somewhere far out in the mesquite, a bird made a single questioning note. I handed over my license through the gap and kept my eyes on his hands. They were too clean. No pen, no ticket book, no notched calluses from a duty belt. He flicked a glance at the plastic and didn't take it. "Step out," he said again, colder now. "Your boy too?" "No," I said, which surprised me almost as much as it did him. "We can proceed from here. I don't consent to my son exiting the vehicle." He leaned down slow like he was deciding where to aim. Inside his hat, the eyes were just dark ovals. I noticed then that the patch on his sleeve wasn't a patch. It was printed on. A costume store lie stitched into a work shirt. The smell hit me, lemon cleaner and a faint sour underneath, the scent of something wiped down often but never washed. "Sir," he said, "not partner now. Do not make this a thing." I smiled because that's what you do when you're scared in Texas. Already is. For a beat longer than comfort, we were just breathing at each other through the open window. The lights on the SUV clicked to a different rhythm, out of sync, one stuttering a fraction late. He shifted his weight like a runner about to start. My hand found the window switch without looking. The glass began to rise with a purr you could almost mistake for calm. He moved fast, faster than I thought he could, jamming his fingers over the top of the glass to stop it. The window motor whined. Eli made a small sound in the back of his throat, the sound a kid makes when a dog runs at him. Then the man took his hand away, stepped back, and lifted his palm in a mock blessing. "All right," he said softly. "All right. You go ahead and think about it another minute." He walked back toward the SUV, not turning fully, just backing and watching. He didn't look at my plate, didn't talk into a radio, didn't do anything people who own authority do to look like they own it. He reached his vehicle and paused at the tailgate, hand on the handle, and glanced once down the empty highway in the direction we'd come. The light was now almost gone. The sky was a purple bruise where the mountains pinched it. He opened the tailgate and bent, blocking my view. "Dad?" Eli said. "Can we go?" "Seatbelt," I said. "Shoulders straight. Hands where you can see them." "To who?" "To me," I said, and my voice had changed again. Somewhere in my chest the decision had already taken shape and was walking around getting the place ready. The man straightened and shut the tailgate, gentle as if not to wake a baby. In his hand was a small penlight. He walked toward us, head cocked, light ready. He aimed it at Eli's face through the glass and clicked it on. The bright point jittered. "You," he said, voice pitching up cheerful again. "Can you step out for me?" I put the truck in drive. The motion was tiny but real, and it felt like cutting a rope. He noticed. The penlight slid to me, then back to Eli. He took 2 fast steps closer, and for the first time I saw his eyes, the whites showing crescent like he was straining to keep them wide. He wasn't trying to look friendly now. He was trying to look like a cop, which is not the same. "Go," he said softly, almost pleased. "Go if you want. But you're going to remember I offered to help." Gravel snicked under our tires. I turned the wheel toward the lane and pressed the gas. The truck hesitated. A moment, a cough, then the engine caught with a hungry sound. The man lifted the penlight higher like a tiny baton and took 1 step toward the front of the truck, as if to be seen by whatever camera might be watching. The red and blue behind him strobed, making him flicker like a card trick. Then we were rolling, slow at first, then faster, and the empty highway opened like a dare. I didn't floor it. I drove a hard, steady 75, and I kept my hands quiet on the wheel. I watched the rear view and the side mirrors so often that the road ahead felt like the reflection. The SUV waited a breath, as if considering its role, and then pulled out. The lights came back on, one rhythm a beat late. It closed the distance until the numbers on my speedometer meant very little. "Dad?" Eli said. His voice was small but not childlike. "What are we doing?" "Staying moving," I said. "Seatbelt tight. If anything happens, you don't open your door for anyone. Not even me. You keep it locked until a real cop shows up." "How will I know?" "You'll know," I said, and wished that were true. The SUV crowded the bumper, lights making my cab into a carnival of panic. Twice it bumped us with a little nudge you'd mistake for a gust if you wanted to. We crested a rise, and I saw, miles ahead, a ghost of something upright against the cooling sky. An overpass, a sign, or maybe a truck stop that had managed not to die. I held us straight, refused the urge to drift onto the shoulder. Behind, the SUV edged to the left like it wanted to pass, then drifted back, testing. "Call Mom?" Eli asked. "No service," I said, because I'd already checked. A new set of lights appeared out of the far dark, white this time, not red, not blue. Headlights coming toward us from the opposite lane. The SUV fell back a car length, then another, as if embarrassed to be caught too close. It hung there uncertainly, and in that moment of human calculation I realized something I wish I hadn't. He wasn't angry the way a cop gets when you don't obey. He was excited. He was playing. A battered pickup drifted by in the oncoming lane, the driver turning his head the way people do when they see trouble from a safe distance. The road dipped again, and the world became a tunnel of my own headlights. The SUV lit up its siren at last, a strangled whoop that cut off after 2 seconds like a recording played by the wrong hand. He surged, then fell back. Maybe he was waiting for empty again. Maybe he was deciding if I was worth it. We saw the gas station 5 minutes later. It wasn't a truck stop exactly, just a low bright island with 2 pumps, a dark diner attached, and a single vending machine blinking like a lonely eye. The lot held a minivan and a semi with its engine idling. A man in a reflective vest smoked by the ice freezer, his phone throwing blue on his chin. Civilization smells like antifreeze and fryer oil when you've outrun something. I didn't signal. I just took the turn hard enough to make the tires complain. The SUV followed, then slowed, then parked across the road's mouth, half blocking the entrance like a dog turning sideways in a hallway. He didn't pull up to me. He sat there with his lights stuttering 1 beat off and his engine purring the way a watched animal does. The man in the vest looked up, took in the show, and called something to the semi-driver that I couldn't hear. The station's glass door side open, and an older woman in a faded t-shirt leaned out to see, one hand bracing the frame, like the entry might try to blow shut. I got out without taking my eyes off the SUV. My legs felt unthreaded, but they held. I kept the truck door open behind me, a shield. "Call 911?" I said to the woman. "Please." "You bet I will," she said, already reaching backward for the phone by muscle memory. The SUV idled. The man inside didn't move. Without the desert stretching all around, his authority shrank. He had to decide whether to become official or remain a shadow. He chose a third option. He turned off the lights. They didn't die together. The red went first, then the blue, like eyelids closing out of sequence. Darkness hopped back onto the highway and the SUV became just another car. It backed up with painful slowness as if not to draw attention, then turned, no signal, and rolled away into the big flat west like it had remembered an appointment elsewhere. I stood there stupidly in the imprecise light and waited to feel brave and never did. The older woman put the phone to her shoulder and said a town name, then a mile marker, then imposter with a hard T. The man in the vest shook his head and spat, a comment that seemed less about the event than about the state of the world. We gave statements. A real deputy arrived in 10 minutes, tan uniform crisp, hat angled in that specific way. He took our story, and while he wrote, he did all the small real things. He asked for my license and ran it in his cruiser. He called the plate I'd half remembered and nodded when it came back as nothing. He told me there had been reports on this stretch. Families mostly, nightfall mostly. Someone playing police with an old auctioned unit dressed up in decals you could buy online. He asked if the man had touched my vehicle, and I said only the window. The deputy dusted the edge with practiced movements and came up with a clean fingerprint that he looked at like a seashell. Pretty but useless without a match. "Why didn't you step out?" he asked finally, curious more than accusing. "Because he wanted my son," I said, and felt Eli's hand find mine under the counter where the credit card machine lived. "He wanted him to step out." The deputy nodded slowly. "That's the tell, isn't it?" he said, almost to himself. "That's the part you can't rehab with a story." We bought 2 coffees we didn't need and stood in the humming air for longer than necessary. The deputy offered to follow us to the next bigger town. I said yes without pretending pride, and he did. His real light steady, his car's interior alive with little radios and folded maps and the life of someone who sits between people and what hunts them. That night in the cheap hotel, Eli pretended to be fine. He brushed his teeth too long. He asked about the Wi-Fi like a kid who thinks questions can replace an image. When the room went dark, he said, "Dad, you weren't scared, right?" I was smart, I said, and hoped he would remember it that way. We made it to El Paso the next morning. We did the things we planned. We ate eggs under hanging plants. We watched trains shuffle through the switching yard like iron snakes. We didn't talk about the man in the hat until we were back on our own stretch of home highway, where the billboards know your name and the land is no longer an enemy you respect, but a neighbor you forgive. A week later, a notice came from the county. It wasn't to me particularly. It was to anyone who might have seen anything. It described a vehicle much like the one we'd seen, except it said the decals might change. It said the driver was polite until he wasn't. It said he requested children step out first for a brief check. It asked for dash cam footage. It asked for plate numbers. It asked for attention. Sometimes at night I go out to the truck and sit in the driver's seat with the dome light off. The window bears the faint scratch of a fingernail where glass met skin. A tiny crescent the detail shop didn't buff away. In that little mark, I can feel the moment choosing us again. I can hear the broken timing of the lights and the way the wind made a sound like paper in a fan. I can smell the lemon cleaner over something sour. I can see the way his eyes worked to stay open wider, how he practiced being what he wanted me to believe he was. Here's the part that keeps me honest. If he'd asked more gently, I might have let Eli step out. If he'd said sir instead of partner from the start, if his uniform had been crisp instead of just convincing, if the light bar hadn't stuttered one beat late, I might have handed him my whole world without knowing. That's the thin veil out there in the desert, the one that looks like normal until you breathe on it and see your own face looking back. The deputy calls sometimes because I asked him to. He tells me they're working angles. He tells me they've got a partial match on a fingerprint to a guy who bought 3 different light bars online and returns them when they don't look right. He tells me none of that is proof. He tells me to stay cautious and to teach my boy to be impolite when politeness is a door someone wants to open. When Eli and I drive at night now, he watches every vehicle that comes up behind us. He calls out the colors of lights like we're playing a game, Once, on a dark stretch not far from home, an SUV rose out of a dip with its hazards on and drifted toward the shoulder. Eli went very still, and so did I. The driver stepped out, round-bellied in a ball cap, and waved us past with both arms, sheepish and grateful. We went on. In the mirror, the hazards blinked together, not quite in rhythm, but close enough. I tell myself that if I ever see the man again, I'll know him. I'll recognize the lemon sour and the wrongness of his words. I'll see the costume stitched to a work shirt. I'll have the presence of mind to get a plate, to angle the truck so the dash cam catches his face. I'll be brave in the way stories require. But sometimes I wake up to the sound of a window humming up and a voice saying, "Friendly as anything, you want him safe, don't you?" And in the dream, I hesitate. Just a second longer. And that is the whole difference between two lives that look the same on paper. In the dream, the lights behind my eyes blink out of time, one beat late. And when I open the door, the night smells like pennies and cleaner, and a victory someone has been practicing for a long, long while. After midnight, our town goes quiet the way a house does after a party. Bottles stacked, laughter still ringing in the walls, but no one left to make it. I was used to that quiet. It was the lullaby that finally let me sleep when my two were down, and the dryer stopped thumping. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with a laundry basket digging into my calves, a cartoon still on mute because my daughter hates the room going dead. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked twice and quit. The fridge gave a tired sigh. The clock on the stove clicked over to 3:02. I remember that because the blue light was the only thing that didn't feel sleepy. The first knock sounded like a broom handle on a ceiling. Not polite, not neighborly. I sat straight up and the basket slid from my knees to the floor with a clap. My phone buzzed on the coffee table with some notification and then went still again, like it wanted no part of what was about to happen. I listened, thinking maybe it was wind, a branch, some loose siding. Then the knock came again, faster. 5 hard raps that rattled the framed school pictures on the wall. "Mom." My son's whisper floated down the hallway. He was 9 and still tried to talk like he was older in daylight, but at night he sounded exactly his age. "It's okay," I called back, keeping my voice low. "Stay in your room with your sister." Another knock, then a man's voice through the door, muffled but practiced. "Ma'am, gas utility and local police. We need you to evacuate immediately. We've got a leak on the block. This is urgent." Every part of that sentence was built to push buttons. "Ma'am, police, leak, urgent." He said it like he'd said it 100 times. I got up and edged to the line where the living room carpet met the entryway tile. The peephole fish-eyed 2 men on the porch. Both had flashlights. Both wore navy jackets with reflective stripes. The one closest to the door had a baseball cap with a patch and something that might have been a badge clipped to his belt. The second guy stood off to the side, shoulder to the house like he wanted to avoid the peephole's eye. The nearest flashlight beam roamed over the doorframe like it was checking for cracks, then settled neatly on my peephole so I was staring straight into a white sun. "I didn't smell anything," I called, because that was the first thing my head could grab. "Natural gas can be odorless depending on the leak," the closer one said smoothly. "We've knocked on every door. We've got a perimeter. We need to move you and the kids. Toss some shoes on. We can bring you down to the corner." He touched the badge with 2 fingers, a gesture meant to reassure. I noticed the badge surface didn't kick light right. No engraved metal, no weight. Like a school ID behind plastic. In the hallway, my daughter's nightlight glowed pink bunnies on the carpet. The air smelled like cotton dryer sheets and the lemon cleaner I used after dinner. No rotten egg tang. No hiss, no headache. It could happen, sure. It just didn't feel like it had. I pressed my eye to the peephole again, squinting around the flashlight's flare. Their jackets were the kind you can buy online. Dark, boxy, reflective tape sewn in bands. Patches on the sleeves that didn't match. One oval, one rectangle. And their boots were muddy like they'd been on a shoulder of a highway. Not a small-town sidewalk. "I'm calling the gas company to confirm," I said, steady as I could, and picked my phone up from the coffee table. I could feel the men listening, their attention a physical heat on the door. "No time, ma'am." The closer one's knuckles tapped the door again. Faster, a little sharpness slipping into his voice. "We've got meter readings spiking and we're staging evac. Come on, be a good neighbor. Grab the kids, good neighbor." I looked over my shoulder at the hallway, then back at the door. In the little circle of glass, the second man turned his head just enough that I could catch a sliver of his face. He was smiling, not friendly. The flashlight dipped a hair like a hand tightening. I didn't call the gas company. I called 911. I put it on speaker, set the phone on the table so the men couldn't see the blue glow, and kept my voice raised for the door. Okay, what street is blocked? Where are you staging? Corner by the stop sign. He didn't say the street name. Everyone around here calls it the stop sign. The first ring clicked in my living room. A soft electronic breath, then the dispatcher came on with a voice that sounded like coffee and fluorescent lights. 1, what is your emergency? I didn't say emergency. I didn't give them the word to hold against me later as a false alarm if I was wrong. Hi, I'm at 14 Spruce, I said, loud enough for the door. 2 men are here saying there's a gas leak and we have to evacuate. Are there units on my street? The porch went very, very still. The closer man's smile, I could hear it more than see it, flattened. A beat and the second man's flashlight lifted, catching the doorframe again like it wanted to find my eye and press a thumb into it. Ma'am, the dispatcher said, and I could hear keys clacking, radio chatter in some faraway room. There is no reported gas leak in your area. We do not have officers canvassing Spruce right now. Stay on the line. We don't have time for this, the man at the door said, and this time he didn't bother with the soft edges. The second man took 2 steps toward the door. The porch boards creaked like an old boat. For a bright, stupid second, I thought about the fact we'd never fixed that creak, that my ex used to step over that spot when he came home late, and then the door shook hard. I shot the deadbolt and put the chain on. The chain was flimsy. I knew that because the day we moved in, the landlord joked that it was for show. I dragged the hall table across the tile with a squeal and braced it against the knob. My son's face peeked around the corner, hair stuck up in sleepy crown spikes. Back, I said, sharp enough that he flinched and disappeared. The knocking turned into a flat palm slam once, twice, ma'am. Officers are en route, the dispatcher said. Can you describe the men? Are you in a safe room? Do not open the door. They said gas utility, I said. Badges look wrong. Patches don't match. There's another slam, harder, and something in the doorframe gave a little cry. Mom? My daughter said, voice tiny. She was 5, still with the soft vowel way of asking questions that makes your heart a tethered thing. Go into my room, I said. Take your brother, closet, shoes, jackets. I tried to make my voice a coat they could wrap up in, silence outside. Then the smiling one again, smooth returned like syrup poured fresh. We can help you with the little ones, ma'am. We're trained for this. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Somewhere up the block a siren whooped. It wasn't close enough to save us, not yet. But it was an idea the men on my porch could hear. I imagined that sound laying itself over their faces and changing the math. We're leaving, the second man said. Not to me. The beam dipped and swung, catching the bare shrubs I'd been meaning to cut back. The old Halloween zip tie still on the railing. The men's footsteps clocked down the porch quick, and then one of them came back for a second, leaned into the peephole's white glare and breathed a laugh that fogged the glass on my side. It was so intimate I jerked back like I'd been touched, ma'am, the dispatcher said. Units are on your street now. Stay inside. Is your door secure? Barely. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My hands were shaking hard enough I had to brace them on the table. I told the kids to stay where they were, told them police were coming, told them everything tired parents say to kids when the plane hits turbulence and you pretend it's a game. Through the peephole, the porch was empty, but the night felt bruised in the shape of those men. When the officers came, their badges looked like badges. Their radios worked like radios, all clipped answers and static. Blue and red strobed my living room walls, and my daughter blinked at the colors like she wanted to stack them in piles and count them. I told the story 3 times, to the first 2 at the door, to the sergeant who came later and looked at the chain like he wanted to apologize to it, and to the neighbor who wandered out in slippers with a robe thrown over plaid pajamas. He kept saying, hell of a thing, like he'd mislaid any other words he might have had. We've had people try this in the county, the sergeant said, rubbing a thumb along the worn edge of his notebook. Not common, but not unheard of. Utility worker ruse, gas leak, water main, dog officer. Get people out of a house or get invited in. Whole family at once if you can. Fast, they pick blocks like yours, quiet, young kids. Single parent, cars in the driveway or not. They pay attention. He looked at my porch, at the sidewalk, at the little chalk hopscotch my daughter had drawn that evening before bath. Sometimes they mark houses ahead of time. Mark, I repeated like a foreign word. My mouth felt like it didn't fit my face. Chalk X on the curb, tape under the mailbox. A rock turned a certain way. Sounds paranoid until you start seeing patterns. He wasn't scaring me to be cruel. He was scaring me because it was more dangerous not to. We walked to the curb in a small procession. Me, the sergeant, the neighbor in his robe like a witness in a nightgown scene. There, faint under the street lamp's halo, was a chalk mark, not an X, a little arrow pointing toward my house. Not the kind my daughter draws, which have hearts for feathers and two long tails. This one was brisk, practical, done by a hand that didn't care about pretty. Could be kids, the neighbor said hopefully. But there weren't many kids on our block anymore. Not the kind who roam at dusk with chalk dust up to their elbows. The officers took photos. They checked my locks. They gave me a good deadbolt speech and a pamphlet that felt insulting in its brightness. After they left, when the house sank back into itself and the blue and red rinse faded off the walls, I sat cross-legged on the rug while my kids slept in my room and replayed every second. My tongue kept going back to details like a tongue worrying a sore tooth, the badge that didn't shine right, the way one patch had been stitched high on the arm, too close to the seam, the baseball cap's brim, flat, new, not sweat softened like a work hat, and that last breath on the peephole, gentle as a kiss. The next day, the gas company came for real. A woman in a hard hat and clip-on ID walked the block with a sensor wand and a bright smile that tried to make all of us feel silly in a good way. "You did the right thing," she said to me. "Always call, always." Her badge threw sparks of sun. Her boots were clean. She crouched in front of my daughter and let her look at the meter reader. "See? It sings if there's trouble." My son drew a map of our house after breakfast, marking exits and safe spots like we'd practiced for fire drills. He added little squares that were police lights and a big rectangle labeled, "Don't open this." He colored the arrow on the curb heavier and heavier until he ripped the paper and had to start over. Then he left the arrow off the next one entirely, like erasing it erased what it meant. We were fine. That's the sentence people latch onto when I tell this. You're fine. Nothing happened. The men left. You were lucky. And all of that is true on paper. But at 3 the following night I woke again to the same silence, to the fridge's tired breath and a dog in the distance telling secrets to the dark. I lay in bed not moving, like my bones were trying to be furniture, listening for a knock that didn't come. Minutes stretched into a shape that felt like an hour, and then snapped back to a rubber band sting. Finally I got up, bare feet silent on the hall floor, and went to the front window to look out. The chalk arrow was gone. Rain hadn't taken it. We hadn't had any. Someone had wiped it in a rush, fingers smearing white dust across the curb in streaks. In its place, just next to where it had been, was a scuff mark, fresh and dark. The kind a boot leaves when it slides a half-inch while the weight above it changes its mind. I stood there, one hand on the curtain, and watched the empty street like it was pretending to be empty for me. I tried to convince myself the scuff was nothing, the smear nothing, the night perfectly ordinary and small. Then from the kitchen, my phone lit the counter with a rectangle of cold light and buzzed. No message preview. Just a number I didn't recognize. It buzzed twice and stopped. I let it go black before I went to pick it up with 2 fingers like it might be hot. The next morning there were 2 fresh little X's in blue chalk, one at the curb across from my house and one 3 doors down. I thought about knocking on my neighbor's door to tell her. I thought about leaving it alone because maybe they were from the hopscotch crowd after all. In the end, I got a bucket and poured warm water over each mark until the color bled and ran into the gutter. My kids watched from the stoop, solemn as judges. We live here still. I changed locks and added cameras and swapped the pretty porch light for something bright and ugly that throws every splinter into relief. I sleep less, and when the fridge sighs at 3, I sometimes sigh back. No one has come to knock again. Maybe they're done with our block. Maybe the siren that night bent their plans just enough. Or maybe, and this is the thought that sits in the wallpaper, they did what the sergeant said. They marked a different way. I pass the rock near my mailbox every morning. If it's turned, I turn it back. If the little strip of tape on the underside curls, I tear a fresh piece and stick it to my gate for myself. There are only so many ways you can tell yourself a house is safe. When friends ask how to know, I tell them the same simple things anyone will. Real badges feel heavy. Real radios talk to someone without excuses. Real emergencies don't mind you calling to check. But that night taught me something else I don't know how to put on a brochure. You'll know because a voice you didn't know you had will speak up and say, "Not this door, not like this." You'll know because the smile on a stranger's face will look exactly like a door in a bad hotel. Hollow, badly hung, easy to kick. You'll know because when you put the phone on speaker, someone on your porch will stop smiling and the house will feel you choose it. And sometimes this is the part I can't make comforting. You'll know and open anyway. The chalk washes away. The scuffs fade. The porch boards still creak in that one spot and I haven't fixed it on purpose. Some nights I stand there and press my heel into the wood and listen to the sound it makes. It's the same sound the door made right before it gave a little, right before it held. I like that it's mine now, a noise I've taught myself to hear. If there's another knock, I'll be awake for it. If there isn't, good. Either way, when the clock ticks over to 3:02 and the blue light from the stove paints the room, I look at the door and tell it quietly, "We did right." Then I wait and I listen to the house breathe with me. I'd been the designated driver in practice, if not a name. Milo swore he was fine, 2 pints over 3 hours, while I nursed club soda with lime because I had an early shift at the hardware store in the morning. The bar on Willow was emptying, the way it always did on a Thursday, with chairs flipping onto tables like the last cards in a losing hand and the jukebox coughing out a final verse before the bartender pulled the plug. Neon bled on wet pavement. Somebody laughed too hard near the alley. The air had that flat, quiet taste of a town that had put itself to bed and would prefer you do the same. Milo did the thing he always did when the lights came up, clapping. Everybody's shoulder like they'd all survived something together. "See you tomorrow, boss," he told the bartender, though they'd never worked a day in the same building. We stepped into the night and it felt as if someone had turned down the volume, just a click. The glass and chatter of the strip muted. Streetlights hummed overhead, casting cones of bug-dusted gold. Farther down, the last taxi slid off like a beetle. Milo tossed me the keys to his Civic and said, "You drive then, Saint." I rolled my eyes and tossed them back. He caught them, smirked, wobbled only slightly. We were halfway to the car when the low thrum of tires came up behind us, slow and deliberate. Blue and red washed across the storefronts. A cruiser rolled to a stop at the curb with the tired authority of something that had done this 1,000 times. "Evening, gentlemen." The window slid down and I only saw the officer's mouth and chin in the spill of dashboard light. The face above it was shadowed by a brim. He sounded bored but friendly, the way a school principal might talk to a couple kids loitering near the fire exit. "You been drinking tonight?" Milo held up both hands, the universal sign for nothing to hide. "A bit," he said. "I'm good. He's the driver." He jerked a thumb at me and then laughed at himself because he'd just contradicted our plan out loud. The officer's mouth twitched. "Mind if I see your IDs?" His door opened. The hinges made a dry, unused-sounding creak. He stood in one practiced motion, tall, broad across the chest, uniform dark and crisp. His boots looked wet black rather than scuffed. As he approached, I had the first small thought that didn't match the rest of the scene. The badge on his chest didn't catch the light like metal. It sat flat, like a decal. Then he was closer, and the thought skittered away because he smelled like wintergreen gum and something sharp underneath it, like a hospital hallway recently wiped down. We handed over our licenses. He glanced at mine for half a second, too quick to be reading, then lingered on Milo's as if it contained a joke only he appreciated. "You, sir," he said to Milo, "are too intoxicated to drive. We've had a safety sweep on this strip since the new ordinance. Lots of near misses." He smiled then, showing a neat row of teeth that belonged in an advertisement for dental care. "Here's what we're going to do to make sure everyone gets home safe." "Hey, he's not driving," I said, and immediately hated how defensive I sounded. "I am." He looked at me, that bored, friendly tone unruffled. "If you're driving, then there's no problem. But protocol says your friend should come sit in the back for a few minutes. Nothing serious. Call it a voluntary drunk tank. Try a breath on the machine, cool his heels, and you can pick him up around the corner. Saves us paperwork, saves you a ticket. Trust me, this is the easy way." Milo already had that pliant grin of the guy who just wants to go along. "It's fine," he said quietly. To me more than to the officer. I'll be back in 10. The officer produced handcuffs. It was so fast and smooth that I missed the exact moment his hand went to his belt. Standard, he said. We had someone bolt last week. Can't have you face-planting into traffic, buddy. He reached for Milo's wrists. Hey, I said, stepped forward, palms out. Hold on, he's not under arrest. Not arrest, he said. Detainment. The word slid out like it had been waiting its turn. The cuffs closed with a click that was delicate, almost polite. Milo's face flickered, the first spark of shame or fear or both, then went blank like a kid being led to the principal's office. The officer took his elbow and turned them with that same smoothness toward the cruiser. As they moved, a gust of night air pushed from the open back door of the car and the smell hit me full, wintergreen over bleach. Not the thin, clean scent of a recently cleaned surface, but that throat-scraping note of something poured heavy and left to steam. Sir? I said, my mouth suddenly dry. Which precinct are you with? The one that keeps your bars open without bodies on the street, he said lightly, not looking back. You can meet us at the substation off 3rd. We don't have a substation off 3rd. It slipped out. He paused a fraction of a second and then kept walking with Milo. That pause landed in my stomach like a dropped coin. At the back door, Milo ducked his head. The interior looked too dark. No mesh, I realized. The partition inside was matte and featureless, not the grated metal I'd seen in real police cars. The seat was covered in something rubbery, and the buckle strap had been cut and taped back together. I took another step and heard the bartender's voice from behind me. Everything all right out here? Because he was doing his final cigarette by the stoop. The officer's head turned. For a heartbeat, his face slid out from the brim's shadow. His cheek had a faint line across it, as if from a mask worn too long. Everything's fine, he called. Routine check. There was a sound then. Not loud, not dramatic. Just the soft, plastic clink of cuffs settling against plastic. But the way it echoed in the quiet made the hairs stand on my arms. I fumbled in my pocket and did the only smart thing I've managed to do in years. I dialed 911 and hit speaker. 911, what is your emergency? A woman asked, crisp and awake. Yes, hi, I said, voice too high. We're on Willow outside Tanner's. An officer is detaining my friend. Can you confirm the unit? He says we're going to the 3rd Street substation, but the officer stopped. He turned, slow, like a hinge he didn't want to startle. The air between us changed temperature. You calling my dispatcher, he asked, and the bored-friendly tone had gone paper-thin. His smile didn't move. Sir, the dispatcher said, we do not have units assigned to Willow at this time. Can you describe the officer? Do not approach. In that second, everything that had been ordinary rearranged itself. The shiny black boots looked like they'd never touched gravel. The badge, so neatly placed, didn't flash at all. The radio on his shoulder showed a dead orange screen. He and I stood 3 yards apart in an empty town, and Milo, my idiot friend, was halfway into the dark mouth of a car that smelled like a mop sink. Sir, I repeated, lower, like you'd speak to a dog. What's your badge number? His mouth did something new, the smile flattening at the corners like it was attached with pins. We're done here, he said. He tried to push Milo in the final inch. Milo braced his knee against the doorframe and swore, panic finally blooming on his face. The bartender took a step closer, flicking his cigarette so the ember traced a small orange arc. Inside the phone, the dispatcher said something about units en route, about staying where I was. The officer darted a glance left and right, all of the neighborly patience gone. He reached behind his hip and I thought, weapon, and threw myself forward without thinking. I didn't hit him so much as I collided with his momentum. We slammed into the door. The handcuff chain scraped. For a half second, I was close enough to see the edges of his patch fraying against brand new fabric. He smelled like wintergreen and bleach and under both, a hint of something copper like old pennies. He shoved me back with an efficient, practiced twist, strong enough that my shoulder rang. The bartender yelled. Somewhere a door opened and a woman's voice said, "What's happening?" The officer blinked twice, as if recalculating a math problem that had suddenly introduced letters. Then he did something that, more than anything else, convinced me he wasn't what he pretended to be. He ran, not a trot to cover, not a tactical retreat. He shoved at Milo's chest to knock him off balance and took off around the hood. The cuff spun emptily on Milo's wrists. The chain had popped loose, and I saw the hinge was cheap, a flea market gimmick polished to a photographic shine. The officer slid behind the wheel and the cruiser roared. The headlights cut across us, searing white, and for one vertiginous second I saw the front plate, blank, and the grille where there should have been the little barcode sticker our town uses, also blank. The car shot forward, then braked hard, then turned. The tires squealed and the cruiser slammed down the street, lights off now except for a single blue flash like a wink. It vanished into the residential dark where porch lights had already given up. We stood there panting in the exhaust and cold insect hum of the streetlights while the bartender crushed his cigarette into the brick with shaking fingers. Milo said very quietly, "That wasn't a cop." He turned his wrists over as if to confirm they were still attached. The cuffs left two little crescents of red on his skin, ridiculous and obscene. The bartender said, "I called it in." And my phone said, "Units are arriving." And the arrival of real police felt suddenly like a second, separate universe, one where time had never slipped. The real officers were bewildered and angry in equal measure, which is a flavor of authority that's almost comforting. They took our statements. One of them, a woman with sleep-tousled hair and a notebook she kept thumbing, walked around the cruiser's tire tracks as if they might tell her a story. "We've had reports," she said, almost to herself. "Different towns. Same MO bleach and a smile. The voluntary drunk tank. He likes the window when the strip goes quiet." The bartender swore softly. "Voluntary my..." The officer with the notebook looked at Milo's wrists and then at me. "People don't run when they're right," she said. "You saved your friend, maybe." The maybe hung there in the cold like a second breath. They didn't find the car that night, or the next. The town Facebook page did the thing it does. Rumor, accusation, vigilante poetry. A week later, a post went up in the county group about a woman 2 towns over who never made it home from karaoke. Her last text to her sister read, "Weird cop. Be right back." You tell yourself the two things aren't connected because if they are, you start seeing the shape of a road you'd rather not know exists. For weeks after, I could smell bleach where it didn't belong. In the aisle at work when we cracked open a box of buckets. At a crosswalk when a city truck rumbled by. Once very distinctly when I stopped at a red light behind an old sedan with a dented trunk. My chest went tight until I remembered ordinary people clean ordinary things and the world does not orbit my fear. But it felt at times like the town had been marked with something invisible, and I was the only one with the right nose to catch it. Milo sobered up, which is to say he promised he would and for the most part did. He's the kind of guy who needs a scare with his lessons. He bought me pizza and said he owed me his life. And I said he owed the bartender as much, and we laughed because it felt like a better script. We avoided Willow for a while. Then we drifted back. People drift back to the places where their ghosts are. It's human, or dumb, or both. A month later, at a grocery store too early for anyone to be friendly, I found myself behind a man at the register who wore a ball cap low enough to shade the upper half of his face. He was buying bleach, a gallon, and a pack of gum, wintergreen. There are 1,000 ways to buy bleach that would mean nothing. There are 100 flavors of gum. I stood there, caught between the easy math of coincidence and the harder arithmetic where numbers add up to something you don't want. He glanced over his shoulder once. The light found his cheek. A faint line, as if something had pressed there long enough to remember. The cashier said, "Have a good one." And he said, with that same practiced, neighborly cadence, "Stay safe." He left. The door hissed shut. The world kept being the world. I wish I could tell you he was caught, that the county posted a photo of a junked cruiser with its light still wired to a stolen switch, that someone's doorbell camera caught the neat smile going blank. Some nights I look at the local news until my eyes burn. There's never a headline that fits. Instead, there are small things. A thread on a message board where someone had their wrist grabbed too firmly while being escorted. A rumor that the 3rd Street substation is a phrase he uses like a password, because it sounds official even though it isn't real. The other night, driving home from the late shift, the rear view filled with blue for a split second as a car bounced over a pothole behind me. My breath caught. No siren, no whoop of a horn. Just that flash like a memory rubber banding back to my face. I pulled into the right lane without thinking. The car behind me kept going. An ordinary sedan. No rack, no paint. I laughed at myself, a sound that felt too loud in the small car. And then I smelled it again. Clean, sharp, the ghost of a mop sink. Maybe it was something in my vents. Maybe it was nothing. I rolled the window down and breathed cold air until the town stretched ahead like a promise. Here is the part I keep to myself when people ask about that night in front of the bar. When they want the story without the part that doesn't sit right. Sometimes, in that whisper lane between sleep and waking, I hear a door open and the soft plastic clink of cuffs settling. Not loud. Not dramatic. Polite. And a voice, tired and friendly, says, "It's the easy way," as if there are only ever two ways, and the one he offers has no paperwork at all. When I smell bleach in places it doesn't belong, I don't hold my breath anymore. I count to 10 and keep walking. Because if he is still out there, the world he moves through is the same as mine, and the only difference between us is that I saw him once with the lights off. And in a town like ours, after closing time, that is not the kind of knowledge that lets you sleep. The night I learned what a uniform can hide started like 100 others. The smell of bleach and espresso clung to my hoodie. My keys were hooked through my finger like brass knuckles, and the town around the campus had shut itself down to a glow of exit signs and open, closed placards turned the wrong way. I'd stayed late at the student center because the printer jammed on a dozen lab reports, and the manager made me log a maintenance ticket like I was filing for a heart transplant. By the time I locked the glass door behind me, my reflection looked as tired as the neon flickering over the laundromat across the street. The desert air was sharp and hollow. You could hear a leaf skitter a block away. The route home was a habit, down Oak, past the realty office with the cardboard cutout realtor that smiles at you after midnight, left at the flower shop that never watered anything, and then straight through the student housing strip, where every porch light was either burnt out or a glare that turns faces into masks. I had my backpack on both shoulders, my mother's rule like it would make me harder to snatch, and I kept my phone in my front pocket with the emergency screen ready. That's not paranoia when the group chat pings every other week with a heads up about someone's roommate being followed by a white truck, or a silhouette hanging around the rec center bathrooms, or the door-to-door magazine guy who never had magazines. I heard him before I saw him. Not the footsteps. Boots do different things against different sidewalks, and these were the soft slap of soles that had learned to walk quiet. But the click of a radio. That tiny, almost polite chirp. Two quick little digital birds. It came from behind me and to the left, and then the wash of a flashlight rolled across the street and sliced my shadow in half. "Evening," he said. Like he was halfway into a smile he didn't have to finish because the uniform finished it for him. Campus PD. The flashlight dipped to my shoes and worked its way up, not lingering long enough to be rude, just long enough to be known. The uniform looked right if you were the kind of person who measures rightness in shapes. Navy shirt with short sleeves showing pale forearms, a stitched-on patch with a star and a shield, black duty belt with the whole hardware store on it. His badge glinted like a coin sunk in tar. He had a cruiser behind him in the mouth of the alley by the shuttered pizza place, light bar dark, the whole car squatting in the shadow like a crouched dog. "Sorry," I said automatically, because girls at night apologize like it's second nature. "Did I?" "You're fine, Megan." The way he said my name didn't wrong-foot me as much as it should have. Of course he knew my name, right? Campus PD knew half the student body by now. "You closing at 11 still?" "The student center?" I said. "Yeah, I mean, tonight was later. Printer jam." He nodded like a man nodding through a story he'd already been told. "We've had some reports. You're on the safety escort list. Figured I'd meet you halfway." I had not put myself on any list, but student affairs loves to put you on lists you never asked for, and the word escort, when it comes wrapped in authority, lands in your ribs like a little warm stone. The kind that sinks slowly. I glanced at the alley. The cruiser had no number painted on the bumper. Maybe it was too dark to see. Maybe I didn't know where to look. The hood reflected the quiet streetlights in a smudged arc like a thumbprint. "I'm good," I said. Because saying you're good is easier than saying you don't trust him. "It's just 3 blocks. 3 lonely blocks," he said. The radio at his shoulder chirped again and he tilted his head toward it. "Dispatch is acting up tonight. Dead spot over on Oak, you know how it is." "I don't," I said. and tried a laugh that belonged to someone less sober than me. He watched my laugh misfire, and for a beat we both stood there in the pale, buzzing glow of a streetlight that made everything look sick. The florist's security gate rattled soft in the breeze like teeth in a paper skull. "You mind if I walk you?" he asked finally. He didn't say I should. He didn't stand too close. He left me the performance of choosing, and I, throat dry, keys between fingers, back aching, took the out he offered. "Sure," I said. "Thanks." He fell in one step behind me to my left. Friendly cop distance. The kind your dad teaches you to keep if you ever get pulled over. Hands visible, elbow room. He kept the flashlight low, sweeping it ahead now and then, letting the beam catch on the oil rainbow in the asphalt and the glitter of broken glass by the bus stop. When cars passed, he let his arm hang, the light dying like a firefly behind his leg. "What year are you?" he asked. "Junior." "Psych major," he said, and there was a smile in it this time. "Right?" I told myself the student center name tag had been visible. I told myself the lady at the coffee bar says names loud enough for the sugar caddies to remember. I told myself 1,000 small ways a stranger learns a piece of you without meaning to. The problem wasn't that he knew it. The problem was how comfortable he was with it, like he'd had the fact in his pocket for weeks waiting for the chance to use it. "Yeah," I said. "Psych, thinking about counseling." "Good field," he said. "Folks talk to you. Makes them feel like they're not alone." We crossed Maple. The laundromat neon flickered and buzzed like a fly stuck in a bottle. Inside, a rolling cart drifted, picture slow across the floor, and my reflection slid across the glass, thin and wary. "You know, Megan," he said conversationally, "Thursday's your late night, isn't it?" "Not tonight. Tonight was a one-off. Printer gem. But usually Thursdays because you cover for the grad who has seminars." The street tightened around my ribs. The keys cut a crescent in my palm. "I mean," I said, "sometimes?" "Sometimes," he agreed, like we were playing a word game. "The thing is, sometimes is most times." The radio at his shoulder chirped again. The little digital birds, and he put his hand up to it as if to quiet them, and I noticed that the metal clip holding it on his shoulder strap wasn't scuffed. Cops bang into door frames. Seat belts grab and scratch. This was a radio that hadn't lived a hard life. He pressed the side, lip curling into a frown, and spoke into it. "Unit 8, he said. "On Maple approaching Pine with escort." Then he turned his head and gave me a quick, apologetic, "What can you do?" look. "Dispatch?" he said into the silence. The chirp came again. No voice. He smacked the casing with 2 fingers, as if the thing could cough alive. "Dead spot," he said. "These apartments jam it. Stupid antenna." We were approaching the student houses. Quiet yards with lawn chairs as permanent as mailboxes. A bike on its side like a deer at the edge of the sidewalk. Porch lights that were either interrogation bright or one flicker away from dying. That's when he angled his flashlight behind us. A neat little sweep that took in the world we had already passed and landed, just by chance, on the cruiser parked in the alley. The beam skated across the windshield and caught the corner of a dangling thing. A little blue pine scent air freshener, still in plastic, swinging, and next to it, stuck to the lower corner of the glass, a parking pass that read, "Fall, City Employees, Senior Center." My feet kept moving because stopping meant making a decision. "That your car?" I asked, and made my voice say teasing instead of terrified. "Loner," he said easily. "We're covering for a city event." They stuck me with a pool car. Budget season. It could be true. The world is stupid like that. Duct tape fixes everything and institutions borrow. He pointed ahead. "You're at the Cedar Court, right? Unit 4? Second floor, corner with the rosemary bush that's dying. Are you..." My throat tightened around the word. "Are you allowed to know that?" He shifted his jaw, thinking. "It's my job to know who needs looking after," he said. "And who might give them trouble? Who might give me trouble?" "Night has its own senses," he said. "You learn it." He was close enough that I could smell his breath, mint metal. He was far enough that if I ran, he'd have to decide to run too. I thought about the pepper spray my mom had mailed me, and how it was in my backpack inside a zipper inside a side pocket under a protein bar. I thought about the self-defense class I took freshman year, and how the instructor wore a padded helmet like a bobblehead, and how I laughed then. Stupid. And now all I could think of was where to aim. We were at the convenience store that closed at 10, where the soda in the cooler never fully chilled, and the owner kept a bat under the counter with white tape wrapped around the handle like medical gauze. The security camera above the door watched us with its red diode winking, lazy, unhelpful. He stopped and I almost kept going like a dog that's forgotten who's holding the leash. He pointed with the flashlight at the side lot. "Cut through there," he said. "It's quicker." "It's darker," I said. The word came out too fast. "Quicker," he repeated, patient, like a teacher. "I'll go with you." I looked at the main sidewalk. There were 3 more streetlights. There was the mural somebody painted of a sun and a hand and the word hope. Peeling. There was a cat on a trash can that would explode into motion if we passed. There was a window lit in the top floor of a house where someone might look out and see me if I had to yell. The side lot was a wedge of black between a cinder block wall and a row of trash bins with their lids yawning. It smelled like old grapefruit and something sweet gone wrong. "I'm okay on the sidewalk," I said, and tried to go polite and firm at the same time. "Thanks, though." He didn't move for a second. The radio chirped. His head tilted, listening to the nothing. The smile that had been growing and shrinking on his face all evening flattened, then inverted like a window shade snapping. "You don't have to be rude." "I'm not," I said, and realized my hands had lifted a don't shoot I didn't want to be sending. My roommate left the porch light on. I can see it from here." "Your roommate's in El Paso," he said softly. "Her boyfriend's a welder. She's posting pictures of tacos with lime on the rim of the plate. You've got the place to yourself this week." The world for a second slid sideways. I felt like I was walking in a dream where the ground is a treadmill and the scenery moves but you don't. That's when the mini-mart's door jittered as someone inside tried it, found it locked and rattled it harder with both hands. A voice swore. The cat on the trash can exploded into a streak and ricocheted off a bin into the night. "Sir?" said the someone behind the glass. A guy in a black beanie, college thick, nose red from cold. He planted his hands on the door like he wanted to push the whole storefront back in place. "You open?" "Closed," the man beside me said without turning, voice going flat and official. "Move along." The guy cupped his hands to the glass, peering around the edge of the decal. He had a face like one of my lab partners, a face that had seen 2 a.m. too many times. "Is everything okay?" he said, but not to the cop. "To me, yes," I said too loud. "Yes, I'm fine." The word fine is a dart that misses the board. He frowned, looked at the badge, looked at me. The question hung in the air between us like a rope. "Move along," the cop repeated, and for a second the man in the beanie did move along, stepping off the curb. The relief that rolled through the cop beside me was like heat from an engine, and then the beanie guy stopped, pivoted, and smacked the glass with the palm of his hand. "Actually," he said, and said it like a bet, "my cousin's in campus security. Those are new patches this year with the shield cut a little deeper. Yours looks old." The smile snapped back into place on the cop's face, too tight now, wrong on the frame. "Dead stock," he said. "Budget season." "Uh-huh," the guy said and pulled out his phone. "I'm going to call my cousin and ask what unit you're on." The cop's radio chirped and he reached up very slowly, like a man about to scratch an itch he knew would give him away. "Dispatch," he said into it. "Confirm my unit." Silence. Then absurdly, from the speaker, a voice. Not a voice, a noise. The recorded rhythm of a radio check loop. The 4-toned beep our campus uses on test days. It spilled into the night, thin and tinny, and I watched the beanie guy's lips part in a little O of surprise that mirrored my own. "Okay," I said, to nobody, and slid my phone out of my pocket, and my thumb hovered over the thing I had set up in my settings a year ago and never thought I'd need. 5 taps, emergency services. My heart was a bird in a wire cage, flinging itself again and again at the bars. The cop turned his head and looked at me like we were at a party and I'd knocked a tray of glasses out of a waiter's hand, and he was deciding whether he cared. "Megan," he said, and the way he said my name this time wasn't a fact. It was a leash. "Don't make a mess," I pressed. The phone buzzed the way a throat clears. The siren sound is always too loud in movies. In real life, it's the opposite. Tucked behind a warning screen like it's embarrassed to be what it is. "For one," the screen said. "Connecting." The cop's hand moved. Not to my wrist or my shoulder. Not yet. It went to his belt like he'd practiced the motion 1,000 times and came back not with a weapon, but with a smile that showed his back teeth. "You want an escort?" he asked, sweet as syrup. "Here's your escort." He stepped into the side lot, expecting me to follow. In that tiny shift, the world came unpinned for him. The beanie guy was still there, his face visible to the black dome camera above the door. The security light on the corner clicked on with a pop. splashing the lot with sudden hard white. And somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog that never barked decided this was the night it practiced. "Sir," said the beanie guy, phone up near his ear now, eyes on me. "She said she's fine. I'll just hang here." The cop looked at him like a person looks at a fly that won't land. The radio chirped. He looked at me. The leash tugged. I took a step toward the main sidewalk. He mirrored into the dark. We were no longer walking together, just two lines crossing. I could feel the decision collecting in the air like static before a storm. He could grab me. He could not. If he did, he would make me part of the paperwork of the world in a way I didn't want to be. A voice came through my phone, distant but real. 911, what's your emergency? I didn't tell a story. I said the cross streets in a voice that was too calm and too loud and not mine. I said possible police impersonator. The words had the taste of metal. The cop smiled as if I'd told a joke on myself he'd heard before. "No need to be dramatic," he said, but he was already backing toward the alley, step by step, eyes on me like he was memorizing not my face but the way my face had looked when I realized what the world could contain. The cruiser in the alley flashed its running lights once, a blink. He turned his head toward it as if someone had called his name. He touched two fingers to the brim of a cap he wasn't wearing. "Get home safe, Megan," he said. "Thursday's a late one." He was gone before the dispatcher asked me to repeat myself, before the beanie guy breathed out and let his shoulders drop, before the security light on the corner cooled and died. I stood there with a phone to my ear and the taste of mint and metal in my mouth, and the smell of grapefruit rot in my nose, and tried to explain to a voice miles away what almost happened. Campus sent out an email the next morning with the subject line, "Important Safety Alert." The words impersonating officers sat in bold like a dare. There was a phone number to call if you had information, and a list of tips that made sense only when you didn't need them. They added a patrol to the student center for a week. Then midterms came. The world prefers to be itself. On Thursday at 11:30, I left with a knot in my throat and walked the long way, in a light as bright as a stage. I passed the alley with the senior center sticker and the herb that wasn't rosemary after all. I passed the mini-mart and the camera and the trash bins and the cat that watched me with a knowing yellow patience. Nothing happened. The air smelled like laundry and rain that wouldn't arrive. I didn't sleep that night. At 2:16, I stared at the ceiling, counting the slow sweep of the fan. At 2:17, a car rolled down the street in neutral, no engine, just tires whispering, and paused outside my building. And kept going. And that would be nothing on another night in another town. On that night, I lay there listening to a small, cheerful sound like digital birds chirping twice in the dark, and I counted them until I had to put my pillow over my ears to stop hearing them long after they stopped. I run the same loop 3 or 4 times a week, and there's a superstition baked into it. If I cross the wooden footbridge before the bakery on Willow turns on its lights, the day goes smooth. That's ridiculous, I know, but it doesn't cost anything to believe stupid little things. The loop cuts through Maple Park, a scatter of ball fields and cartoonish play structures, then curls along the creek where fog likes to squat low on the water like a lazy cat. In spring, it smells like cut grass and yeast from the bakery. In late autumn, it smells like damp leaves and the metallic tang of cold. That morning, it was cold enough that my breath came out in glyphs, each one drifting ahead of me as if I were chasing what I'd just said. It was quiet in that way. Small towns are quiet before sunrise, the kind of quiet you can hear move. An HVAC unit humming behind the library, a garbage truck a mile away doing its prehistoric beep in reverse, the creek going on with its business whether or not anyone listened. I had a playlist on low in one ear and the other ear empty, because I tell myself that makes me safer. My shoes made a wet bread squeak on the path where last night's mist had settled and half frozen. The footbridge was a dark rib cage ahead of me. On the other side, the path snaked toward the softball field with its yellow fencing like a crayon outline. There's a little hill there that never feels like much in a car but hits like a stairwell on foot, and I was halfway up it when I saw the cruiser's silhouette parked near the equipment shed. Not lights, just a shape with the shoulder of a light bar, nose angled toward the path. It was out of place. Cops like to angle where they can spring into things. This looked like it had been rolled there and forgotten. The fog turned the shape into a suggestion. I kept running, telling myself it was nothing, a new patrol, a rough night. Maybe they were checking the bathrooms again because kids had been tagging things with spray paint lately and leaving beer cans shaped like apology letters. He stepped out as I crested the hill. The uniform was the first thing I registered. Dark blue with the stiff hang of something new, the crease down the pant leg so sharp it could cut paper. He had the rectangle of a badge over his chest and a nameplate that caught what little light there was. His hat was wrong, though. The brim was too flat, like something you'd order online and get in a size labeled most men. He put one hand up, not quite a wave, not quite a command. I slowed because everybody slows for authority, even when authority looks like a paper doll held up in the fog. "Morning," he said. His voice was all friendly oatmeal. "Ma'am, can you hold up a second? Is something wrong?" I asked, thumb-tapping pause on my music. "Just routine," he said. "There's been a situation in the neighborhood. We're talking to early risers, making sure everyone's accounted for." He smiled the way men smile when they want you to know they mean no harm. The smell of him arrived, the plastic-clean scent of a Halloween store, synthetic leather warmed by a car heater. His uniform had that out-of-the-bag shine. The cruiser behind him wore its decals like stickers on a lunchbox. They bubbled around the door handle. "What kind of situation?" I said. I was very aware of the fog curling around my calves. The creek made a thin, conversational sound. It felt like the park had been emptied of other people with a straw. "Domestic call," he said. "Possible burglary. Just need to ask a few questions." He had a little notepad in his hand. It was the old kind with a spring at the top. He flipped it open and stared at nothing written there. "What's your name?" I gave it because the word officer lives behind your teeth like a key. "I live on Cedar," I added, because saying more feels like honesty, and honesty feels like safety. "Cedar," he repeated, like he was tasting it. "That's near the old feed store, right?" "It's a coffee place now," I said, and he blinked once too slow. His eyes did the math in public. "Right," he said. "Right, would you mind stepping over here? It's a little dark on the path." He indicated the front of his car. Up close, the grille had a badge stamped into the plastic that read Interceptor, but the letters were slanted like italics someone had guessed at. The siren tucked into the grille was a black circle with a cheap mesh. As I stood there, a faint sound bled out of it, a looped chirp that cut off and started again like a ringtone you never pick up. "What's that?" I asked. He looked down, annoyed. "Battery backup," he said. "We've been having trouble with the unit." He cleared his throat and pasted the smile back on. "You out here every morning?" "Most," I said. Is your partner around?" It came out too casual. He didn't like it. "Budget's tight," he said, which was the wrong answer. "We're small, but we're not one cop in the fog small." He shifted and the gun on his hip knocked against the door. It made a sound like hitting a plastic toy against a countertop, not the weighty clink I know from living with a father who cleaned his duty weapon at the kitchen table like it was a ritual. The understanding didn't come all at once. It came as a confluence of tiny wrongs. The hat brim, the bubbled decals, the empty notepad, the looping chirp, the toy sound of the gun. And the smell. My dad's uniform smelled like starch and old wool and gun oil. This smelled like a Halloween aisle. The badge on his chest had an emblem, but when the fog thinned enough for the path light to touch it, the emblem didn't have depth. It was a printed image under a plastic dome. "I can give you my info from here," I said, "or we can walk to the bridge. There's a camera on the lamppost." "There isn't a camera. There's a spiderweb that catches gnats in my hair." But he didn't know that I knew that. His smile thinned as if the fog had eaten it. "Ma'am," he said again, and the word bent. He placed his palm on the interceptor letters like he was steadying the car, like it might roll. Up close, the tires were shiny and soft-looking, the kind you see on dealership lots before dust introduces itself. No state inspection sticker on the windshield. No little town seal. The license plate bracket was empty. The front bumper had a hole where a screw had been, a black mouth. My dad used to say that real authority doesn't mind proving itself. It's eager to, even. It knows what it is. I looked down at the gun again. The safety was a molded bump. No red dot. The magazine well was a seam in the plastic, not a separation. If I squinted, I could see the toy company's logo ghosted near the trigger like a watermark. "What precinct?" I asked. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone watching a movie and trying to talk to the screen. "We're county," he said too fast. His voice lost its oatmeal. Look, you can either answer a few simple questions now or we can do this downtown. Your choice. Okay, I said, because sometimes okay is how you get out of a room. Question 1? I took a step back without taking a step back. An ankle-length retreat the way you instinctively make space for a stray dog. He moved forward to close it. The fog made his legs look like they came apart at the shin. He glanced past me then, over my shoulder toward the path I'd come from, and his jaw went still the way dogs go still when they're deciding whether to bark or bite. I didn't need to look. Looking would tell him what I hoped. I stared at his nose and let my face do the boring work of being a citizen. My full name is... A voice tumbled up the hill behind me, bright and normal, the sound of a life you forgot existed. Amy? That you? It was Mark, the biology teacher who feeds the ducks despite the sign that says not to, who runs at the same stupid hour because he thinks it keeps him from grating in his dreams. He had one of those blinking safety bands on his wrist. The blink made a soft click when it hit the end of its cycle. The not-quite cop flicked a glance toward the sound and then back to me. I saw him weigh math again and come up short. "We're done," he said, voice flat. He turned without any of the ritual moves cops make. No, "You're free to go," no, "Thank you for your time." He slid into the driver's seat. When he shut the door, the car made a hollow, refrigeratory thump. The engine tried to sound like a real thing and didn't quite. The looping chirp from the siren hiccuped, then went silent as if someone had finally found the off switch. By the time Mark's blinking wrist came level with us, the car was rolling. It didn't reverse to re-angle. It made a wide arc on the wet grass, tires squeaking like sneakers, and drifted back toward the service lane that runs behind the maintenance shed. The fog swallowed the rear bumper whole. Mark's breath clouded in front of him. "Everything okay?" he asked. "I think so," I said, but my voice made a question of it. He squinted into the fog and then back at me. "What did he want?" "Just questions," I said. The footbridge waited at the bottom of the hill. I could see the slick sheen of dew on the rail like sweat on a lip. "Did you see his plate?" Mark shook his head. His blink band clicked. "Didn't even look. We got new guys I don't recognize all the time." He was smiling because that's what you do when everything's probably fine. "Want me to run with you the rest of the way?" "Yes," I said, already moving. We didn't talk across the bridge. The bakery's lights were on. The superstition should have covered me. It didn't. I called non-emergency when I got home and talked to a dispatcher who had a grandma's voice. I told her about the hat brim and the badge that was printed under plastic, and the way his gun made a clacky sound. I told her about the looped chirp. She listened the way good people listen, letting me get to the end of the tunnel before asking for the details again. She said they'd send a car through the park just in case. She asked if I wanted an officer to stop by. I said no without thinking, and then after a beat, yes. Saying yes felt like admitting something had touched me that I couldn't scrub off. 2 real officers came by. Their uniforms had the wear of 1,000 sitting downs. Their hats had lived on real pegs. Their car door closed with a sound that meant business. They listened and asked the same questions and wrote real words in a real notebook. They didn't mind showing the edges of their authority. "Here's my badge, here's the city seal, here's how the light bar works, here's what the siren sounds like." It didn't loop. My father would have approved. They left me with a card and a suggestion to run with a buddy for a while, or at least with a brighter vest, as if light could repel the wrong kind of person. I nodded and thanked them and shut the door and stood in my kitchen with my hand on the counter, like I was expecting the house to tilt. My neighborhood was waking, a dog complaining, a shower starting, someone discovering they were out of cereal. I put the kettle on because that's what people do when they don't know what else to do. The window over the sink fogged a little from the steam, making the world outside look like a watercolor of itself. I thought about the car's bubbled decal, about how a sticker can look like the real thing until you really, really need it to be. I didn't run the next morning. I sat on the couch and watched a game show with the volume low. The host's smile was permanent no matter what the contestants did. It felt obscene. By the 3rd morning, I was angry in that practical way anger gets, like laundry, like a bill. I texted Mark and we met at the trailhead with matching reflective bands like children with permission slips. The fog was thicker, the kind that turns the world into a room you're not supposed to be in. We did the loop, and everything was so ordinary that ordinariness itself felt staged. The creek talked to itself. The bakery lights clicked on exactly as we crossed the wooden bridge, which should have meant I'd bought myself a smooth day. I didn't say it out loud. We were near the little hill by the equipment shed when it reached us. Not loud, not a blast, but a thin mechanical bleat. It cut off and then started again like it had to find itself every time. It came from the shelter of the trees behind the maintenance lane, from the place where the fog sweeps up and tucks itself under the bending branches. Bleat. Silence. Bleat. The timing was wrong for a real siren. Too tidy. Mark slowed. "You hear that?" he whispered, as if the fog could overhear and carry the secret away. "I do," I said. I couldn't see a car. I couldn't see anything that wasn't fog or tree or the world my superstition builds. We stood there with our breath making little applause in front of our faces, listening to a loop on a speaker that wanted to be a siren. Bleat. Silence. Bleat. Somewhere out in that moving white, something that wanted to be authority waited to see who would come when it called. We didn't. We walked backward the way people do when they can't stand to turn their backs on the thing they're leaving. My shoes had the wet bread squeak again. The fog pressed cold fingers against the back of my neck as if to insist gently that I was making a mistake. When we reached the bridge, Mark finally spoke, bright and normal on purpose. "Coffee?" It sounded like a rescue rope. We crossed, and the bakery light seemed like an overreaction. Too warm, too yellow. I kept listening for the bleat. Sometimes I think I still hear it. When a microwave finishes, when a babysitter's pager goes off in a movie, when a truck backs up half a mile away. It's a thin sound that cuts the morning into slices. I run at a different time now. I wear a brighter vest. I carry the ugly little aluminum whistle the officers gave me because they wanted to give me something. I cross the bridge and I don't look toward the equipment shed even when I want to. Some nights, when the fog builds along the creek and the world shrinks to the size of my porch light, I sit with the window cracked and listen to the town adjust itself. The HVAC and the garbage truck and the water running somewhere it should. I remind myself that real authority is glad to show you what it is. It doesn't hide in trees. It doesn't wear bubbles at the edge of its name. But the part of me that believes in stupid little things also believes there's a car in the fog that doesn't exist. A hat from a costume store poised to tilt. A smile that can be arranged like furniture. Somewhere, a loop is waiting for the exact moment it thinks you'll be alone. And the bleat that pretends to be a siren is practicing, again and again and again, until someone trusts it enough to step closer. Night shift teaches you the shape of quiet. It's the hum over the south lot, the beetle clicking on concrete, the breath you finally hear after 12 hours of alarms. I signed out, tucked my badge in my scrub pocket, and stepped into air that smelled like hot dust and disinfectant drifting from the loading dock. The hospital sits on the edge of town where warehouses take over from neighborhoods, all corrugated metal and chain link. I like it at that hour, when even the highway sounds far away, like someone else's problem. I heard the engine before I saw the car, a soft high idle like a refrigerator in a quiet house. Two men stepped out of the dark between dead lamps. Jackets, plain trousers, that square stance cops use when they want you cooperative. The taller one flipped a leather case open so fast I caught only the glare of something that looked like a badge. "Evening," he said. "Detectives. Routine check. Hit and run up on Birch. We're taking statements from night staff." He nodded toward a dark sedan idling by the curb with the passenger door open. "Won't take 5 minutes." Real cops drift through the ER all the time. The ones I know wear an authority like a heavy coat. These two had the outline without the weight. He flashed the case again. The seal inside was a shade off, the plastic cloudy at the edges where lamination doesn't meet clean. My stomach tightened like a fist. "Can I see your radios?" I asked, polite. "I hear them in my sleep." "In the car," the shorter one said. He kept glancing up at the entrance camera and then away like a kid checking a teacher. His jacket smelled of wintergreen and too strong detergent. 5 minutes, the tall one said, palm open to the passenger seat. "Bring your things." I smiled the smile every small woman learns to keep men calm. "Let me toss my cardigan in my car," I said, starting to move. "If I take it, I'll forget it." "Bring it," the tall one said, patience flattening. 1 minute, I said, angling into the square of good light so the camera had me full. Wade was on nights. He pretends not to know the cameras and learns fast when it matters. I opened my back door and leaned in as if to set the cardigan on the seat. My thumb woke my phone and I called the operator. When she answered, I pitched my voice bright as if this were normal. "Could you page Dr. Lane to the south stairs?" The word stairs is our quiet alarm. It means bring help but don't panic whoever's listening. "Melissa," the short one said, reading my name off my badge like we'd met. "Let's go." "Do I need a lawyer?" I asked. "My brother's a deputy up in Cotton Ridge." "We don't have a Cotton Ridge. We have a Cotton Road and a Ridge Drive. We're not arresting you," the tall one said. "Statement. In the car." He touched my elbow, his hand hot through the thin scrub sleeve. I let him. Sometimes the fastest way to buy time is to let someone think they're already driving. The sedan's interior was very clean in the way rental cars are clean. No grit on the floor mat. A gray blanket rolled tight on the back seat. The inside handle carried a bright nick where a screwdriver had scraped the child lock. I slid halfway into the passenger seat and found the belt latch. Someone had split the rubber button and glued it back. "It stuck to my skin. Just around a birch," the short one said, leaning across me like a flight attendant. Over his shoulder, the entrance camera nudged. Wade had heard me. He was looking. "Mind if I text my husband?" I asked, thumb already moving. If I'm late, he assumes I've been eaten by the vending machine. I sent a message to Jenna at the desk. "Call 911. South lot 2 men badges fake," and let my phone slip between the seat and the door like I'd fumbled it. "Belt," the tall one said. The engine changed pitch. "Ready." I brought the belt across my chest and let the tongue hover. "County or city?" I asked, casual. "Who's your sergeant?" "County," the short one said too fast. "Ellis. We don't have a Sergeant Ellis, we have an Ellis who fixes sinks." I nodded as if names calmed me and counted silently. 3 breaths, 2 beats to unthread, 1 to throw myself sideways. Headlights swept the lot as a truck turned. For a second, the 3 of us were lit like actors on a cheap stage. Wade's shape crossed from the entrance. Pace too slow for a man running and too steady for a man minding his business. "Evening," he called, voice heavy enough to travel. "Everything okay, Melissa?" He said my name like we'd been discussing a vending machine. "Police business," the tall one said through his window. "Back off." Wade nodded, mild. "Can I see your badges?" His left hand held his radio lazy at his hip. His right thumb, out of their sight, pressed the orange emergency button. Sirens began as a stacked chord somewhere out in town and separated into notes as they got closer. The laminate flashed and Wade barked a laugh he didn't mean to. He took 1 more step. It put him within arm's reach of the passenger door. "Belt," the tall one snapped. The short one shoved the latch toward the buckle. Pretend to faint and the grip shifts. His arm lifted a hair. I threw my weight into the door. It slammed into him with a thud that rang in my teeth. I spilled onto concrete, palms burning. The belt snapped free with a rubbery pop. The sedan jerked backward, tires scuffing. Wade grabbed the door handle with both hands and held it like a man keeping a refrigerator from tipping. For a breath, we were a crooked mobile. Me on the ground, Wade braced, the short man swearing, the tall man choosing. He chose forward. He let the door go, slammed it, and mashed the gas. The car shot into the dark with its lights off, a black fish vanishing into a black pond. By the time the sirens rounded the corner, the sedan was a sound, not a thing. I sat in the smoker's chair by the dumpster while blue lights made the brick look underwater. Wade's hands shook, which he blamed on the night air. An officer I knew from ER took my report with a gentleness that made me want to cry in a way the danger hadn't. I gave them a scrap of duct tape stuck to my cardigan and a description of the laminate badge. The blanket, the child lock scratch, the detergent smell. The officer nodded like he believed me. Wade kept close enough that our shadows touched. They didn't find the car. Cameras caught dark moving fast past warehouses. A detective with a badge that clinked when he tapped it said similar approaches had cropped up along the corridor that connected our hospital to the highway. Always at shift change, always with routine check. He asked me to repeat Ellis and went quiet. He said escorts would be beefed up. He said I'd done right. People say that like blessing and apology both. For a week I parked under the good camera and let Wade walk me out. He complained and came anyway. Fear is a habit. I tried to starve it by changing little things. Some nights I walked fast with the operator's number cued. Some nights I stood in the light by my car and made myself breathe like I tell patients to breathe when the monitor alarms for nothing. The beetle kept clicking. The transformer hummed. Ordinary, ordinary, ordinary with an edge. 2 days later I found a laminated shield on my locker. For 1 pulse-long beat, the parking lot came back with full smell and temperature. Then I saw someone had drawn a cartoon face and world's okayest detective in Sharpie. New nurse humor. I laughed with them and then stood alone in the medroom and let my hands shake. You can function fine through a lot and still have to shake somewhere. Another week and I heard that high, quiet idol again walking out to the lot. The fluorescents were steady. The air smelled like a held-back storm. I stood still. I didn't see a car. The sound stopped like someone had pulled a plug. When I reached my Honda and hit the fob, the chirp sounded too loud. I made myself count the pillars to the exit and counted them back. I got in, locked the doors, and put both hands on the wheel where I could see them, as if that mattered. At the last light before the highway, a dark sedan fell in behind me. One headlight was a hair dimmer than the other. In the mirror, the grille was a square of shadow. I turned on my blinker toward the gas station where the cashier with the half-sleeve calls everybody babe. The sedan went straight. It drove into a night that belonged to it. I sat and let my hands tremble on purpose. People ask if I'm okay now. I say yes because mostly I am. I park closer to the camera when I remember. I keep my keys between my fingers like I'm going to open more than a door. Wade walks me when he's there, and when he isn't, I count the blind angles and do my breathing. The routine is visible now. Every step from doors to Civic, every proper shadow and every wrong one. Sometimes I stand a little too long in my pool of light to prove that I can. That works until it doesn't. Last week, a patient's grandson, all elbows and worry, asked if bad things happen for a reason. I told him what Wade told me after the statements and the coffee and the quiet. He touched the camera pole like it might be holy and said, "Sometimes the reason is you saw what you saw when you saw it." It sounded simple and stuck. I don't know about reasons. I believe in cameras that move on the right word, operators who answer on the second ring, and the way your skin knows when somebody is near. The south lot looks the same, but it isn't. Now I notice the screw scratch on the child lock when I pass any car. I smell wintergreen and think of motel detergent. I hear an engine in a dishwasher commercial and my hands find each other without asking. And sometimes, leaving at midnight, I hear a soft high idle begin somewhere I can't see. It stops when I look. The air goes back to buzzing. I stand a second longer under the light, trying to tell if I'm braver than I was the night they said routine check, or if I've only learned how to pretend. Then I count the pillars and walk to my car, and the quiet comes with me like a living thing. Dad always said the parking lot at dusk had its own weather. In the time it takes the buses to cough out their last diesel breath and the teachers to wander toward their cars with their canvas totes, the place changes. The light gets copper-colored. The shadows grow long enough to snag your ankles. On days he ran late, I would sit on the bench by the flagpole and listen to the hum of the sodium lamps and the distant click of the tennis courts, and that evening felt like every other. I could smell cut grass from the practice field and floor wax drifting out of the open doors where the janitors were pushing their wide, slow brooms. I had my backpack at my feet, a slice of history worksheet curled in my hand, and the kind of boredom you only feel when you have nowhere else you're supposed to be. The sky was a mackerel blue fading toward purple. It was the middle week of cross-country tryouts. Dad texted that he was on his way, a stoplight or two away, the same message he always sent. I watched the last bus make the turn by the maintenance shed and disappear. That was when the car pulled in. It came from the far entrance by the tractor gate, quiet on its tires, not the loud mural-wrapped school resource SUV, not the black and white you see cruising Main Street. It was the kind of car you only notice if you've been told to pay attention. A dark gray sedan with a nudge bar and a stubby antenna, a front seat without the wire mesh cage. Its headlight stayed on as it rolled past the yellow speed bumps, then turned in a slow loop like it had all the time in the world to find the right angle to stop. The air smelled faintly of hot brakes. I remember thinking how clean it looked, not dusty like the town cruisers get by the end of a summer day. It idled in front of the flagpole, the engine's low hum settling under the lamp buzz, and then the driver's door opened with a muffled thunk. He stepped out tall. Uniform blue, short sleeves, a thin line of salt along his temples. He wore the kind of calm face that looks like it's been on 1,000 forms, the smile that doesn't show teeth. The badge on his chest flashed and died in the light. He said my name. He didn't shout. He said it like a neighbor calling across a hedge. "Emma," he said. "You're Emma. Your dad's Daniel, right?" My throat closed around my answer. The way he said it, not a question, but a line that had already been double-checked. I nodded. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't glance down at a clipboard. His eyes held mine just long enough to make it feel like we knew each other from somewhere I couldn't place. "I'm Officer Blake," he said, touching the badge with 2 fingers. "There's been a minor accident up the road. Your dad asked me to get you to the station." "He's okay, just shook up. He said you'd be waiting right here." I have a habit of saying I'm fine even when I'm not. I have a habit of standing up when people in authority tell me to. That evening, those habits felt like something in me that didn't belong to me, like a software default somebody else set. I rose halfway, and then I heard Dad in my head from a winter safety meeting in the cafeteria, when the resource officer gave his talk and the PTA handed out keychain whistles. Dad had made a joke, and then he stopped joking and told me a story about a girl in his high school. He'd looked at me until I rolled my eyes and said the things he wanted me to say. Ask for the safe word. Call me yourself. Don't go anywhere alone. Trust but verify. I swallowed and half sat back again. My hands were shaking, but I pretended to dig in my backpack. "What station?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "He's okay." "North side," he said at once, like he'd been waiting. He clipped a delivery truck turning onto Plum. "He's fine. He's got a sore shoulder. You can talk to him when we're on our way. Let's beat the traffic while it's still clear." I looked past him at the sedan. The headlights washed the bench pale. The radio inside hissed, then clicked, then went silent. The car had no number on the roof. There was a scuff on the nudge bar, a pale smear like dried concrete. On his belt, the flashlight holster hung a little lower than I'd seen on Officer Alvarez. His boots were polished, but the sole edges showed a ragged white line. Little things. The kinds of details you only notice because your brain is flipping through pages, trying to match what you see to what you've been told. "What's the safe word?" I asked. I said it like I was teasing, like we were both in on something. I felt a hot shift in my chest when I said it. He didn't blink. He leaned his weight to one hip, easy. "Your dad sounded a little rattled," he said. "Wanted you picked up, not standing out here while the light goes." "I'm sorry if this is scary. Let's just go. You'll see him in 10 minutes. He hadn't answered. He'd answered around it. I managed a smile I didn't feel. "He always forgets," I said. "What kind of truck did he hit?" "Just a white box truck," he said. "You know how people take that corner like a racetrack. It happens. Dad had told me he was 2 stoplights away. The sedan's radio hissed again, and then a voice came thin and high, like someone imitating radio. 10-something, code 40-something. I didn't know the codes, but I'd heard Officer Alvarez call out plate numbers on Spirit Night. It didn't sound like that. It sounded like a recording played through a tin can. My phone vibrated and I grabbed it as if I'd planned to. No new message. The one from earlier glowed on the lock screen, the tiny delivery checkmark beside it. I could see my face reflected in the glass and the thin gray shape of him over my shoulder. "What's your badge number?" I asked. He barely glanced down, then lifted the badge 2 inches with his fingers. The light caught it again. The number stamp at the bottom looked warped, as if it had been rubbed against concrete. The digits were ghosted, scratched until they blurred into dull metal. He smiled for the first time. "You're cautious," he said. "That's good." He pushed the badge forward a little, closer to my eyes, and the motion felt like the soft push of a hand at the small of your back when you're standing at the edge of a pool. "Let's go. We're burning time." A gull laughed once in the air. Somewhere in the building, a vacuum leaned into a wall and thudded. I thought of asking him to call. I thought of walking past him into the office to get the secretary. But the office lights were already dark and the big glass door had that dim aquarium look. The janitors moved like slow shadows on the far side of the atrium. It would take me 20 steps to get there. It would take him 5 to catch my arm. "Can I drive my own car?" I asked and then laughed. "I wish. I don't have my license yet." "You'll sit up front," he said, and he opened the passenger door. The dome light came on and made a pale bowl of the interior. No cage. The seat was clean, too clean, the kind of clean that looks new because nobody ever sits there. On the dash, the computer mount was empty. A cheap plastic cup with a lid sat in the holder. The smell that came out was not coffee. It was a sweet, stale smell like a closet that holds someone else's clothes. My palm went slick. I slid my phone into it like a coin and started a call to Dad, thumb shaking. He would pick up. He would always pick up when I called from school. The call rang. The man's eyes went to my hand and then back to my face. He kept his smile. He stood between me and the office door, but not in a way you could complain about. The ring climbed toward voicemail. I told myself to let it go to voicemail and play it on speaker, while I stood under the flag and waved at the camera like we'd practiced in middle school. I told myself that made sense. I told myself a lot of things at once. He stepped closer. "Let's not do this here," he said softly. "I know this is a lot. We can talk to your dad on the way." "Do you know the dispatcher's voice?" I asked. "Could you patch me through to her?" "I know her. She came to our career day." He didn't break groove. "New girl today," he said. "Training." The scratched badge glinted like wet stone. My call went to voicemail. Dad's voice began talking in that fake cheerful way he uses when he doesn't want clients to hear his real day. My eyes burned. I could end the call and hit redial, or I could keep it going and talk to the recorded version of him like a little kid. I did neither. I drew a breath. "Officer Alvarez knows me," I said, louder, for the empty parking lot and the camera and the falling evening. "She told me if I ever needed a ride, she'd take me herself." Something small went out of his face. "Not anger, not yet. The way a dog's ears shift when it hears a sound too high for you." He glanced at the school building and then back at me. A car went by on the road out front, not slowing. The sound of its tires was a breath over sandpaper. "Alvarez is off," he said. "She's on baby leave." "She came by last week with the baby," I said. "She's back part-time." I still don't know if that was true. It felt true when I said it. My voice sounded like someone else's, brave and sure, while my heartbeat pounded like shoes in a stairwell. He moved again, smaller this time. A shift of weight. He kept his hands visible and empty. He never touched me. He didn't need to. He was the kind of man who understood geometry. How to place a body between another body and a door. He had all the angles of the lot memorized. He had probably been here before. "How about this?" he said. "I'll call it in right here." He reached to the radio on his shoulder and pressed the button, and the hiss rose again. The voice that came through was a different voice than before, but somehow the same. Too measured, too clear. He said my name and my father's and our street, and hearing it spoken out of his mouth made the empty lot tilt. We don't have our names pasted to our foreheads when we walk out of the school. We use them 15 times a day in classroom roll calls. We talk about our parents and our streets on forms we leave on office counters and with friends who leave their phones on cafeteria tables. He spoke those names like he owned them while the radio pretended to chatter. "See?" he said. "It's all right." One of the janitors glanced out the glass doors, a flash of face and reflection. I lifted my arm high and waved my whole hand, and the man lowered his shoulder like a dancer, casual as if adjusting his stance. The janitor's face moved away, the way faces do when they don't think anything is wrong. The parking lot lights popped brighter as the sky went a step darker. Moths hit the fixtures high above, little soft taps like fingernails. I was breathing too fast. I took a step backward toward the flagpole. My heel bumped the concrete base and stopped. He kept his distance and opened his palm toward the open car door like a salesman. The dome light burned steady. Inside, the seatbelt lay flat, ready. "Emma," he said, very gently now. "Trust me." Dad's second text came in with a chirp and a light in the corner of my screen, and the sound cut through everything. "Be there in 2. Sorry, traffic. Don't go inside, I'll pull up." It was stamped 3 minutes later than the last. The man's eyes flicked down and up. He read upside down and backward, probably as easily as breathing. "Traffic is worse," he said. "Things change." He took a step toward me, slow enough not to be called fast. I smelled the sweet closet smell again and a bare edge of metal, the way keys smell when you hold them too long. I pressed the side button and hit the school's auto dial number with my thumb. It rang and I held it out. "I'm going inside to wait," I said. "If you're for real, come in with me and say hello to the secretary." "There's no time," he said, and the gentle peeled away. It wasn't a snap or a shout. It was an efficiency. His voice stopped wearing the town's accent. "We go now." He took another step, and I did not mean to, but I screamed. Not like a movie. Not a theatrical wail. The noise that came out was ugly and high and close to a sob. It wasn't for him. It was for doors and cameras and the moths and the janitors and the empty spaces where teachers had been a minute ago. It was for the physics of sound. It was for anything that could hit the air and move faster than his hand if it ever decided to. I kept screaming as I moved, grabbing my backpack with a jerk that made my history worksheet tear. His face did something I will always be afraid of seeing again. He didn't get angry. He got disappointed. The way people look when the trick doesn't land. Then his eyes went flat. He moved fast then. no pretense. He came around the car door and for a second his hand lifted, not grabbing, not a threat you could point at later. Just enough to show me the idea of it. I stumbled backward and fell hard against the flag base and kept the scream going. Ragged and loud enough that my throat hurt. The janitor's face snapped back into the glass and then his body. And he was fumbling at the crash bar on the inside as my voice bounced off the doors. The man's mouth tightened. The radio gave that tin can voice too late and too clean. He closed the car door. The dome light went out like someone pinched it. He slid back behind the wheel in one smooth motion, head tucked, hand on the top of the wheel like he'd done it 1,000 times. The door shut soft. The sedan rolled forward without a lurch. He went around the faculty lot instead of the student loop and took the exit by the maintenance shed. As he passed the corner, the headlights swept the brick wall, and for a second I saw the reflection of his shape in the glass. A dark and perfect uniform with a badge that didn't show any numbers at all. Then he was gone and the janitor was at the door and Dad's car turned in with his hand already up and his mouth already open. And everything happened at once. I was crying and laughing and trying to explain the scratched badge and the radio in our names, listing them as if that was the worst of it. Dad wrapped his arms around me and kept saying okay in a voice that was not okay. The principal's keys jangled. Officer Alvarez's name came up, but she was at a pediatric appointment. She really was back part-time. The security video was pulled. The cameras had caught angles and reflections and a plate number that turned out to belong to a pickup in another county. An officer I didn't know took notes in neat lines while I talked out the heat of my breath and the smell I couldn't wash off my hands. Later, when the adrenaline drained, I shook so hard my teeth hurt. They told me I was brave. They told me I'd done everything right. They said there were men who watched the rhythms of places, who learned the grammar of ordinary, and then spoke it back in a voice that sounded official. They said the radio might have been a phone on a loop. They said it happens. They said a lot of things in voices made to comfort. When Dad and I sat in the kitchen that night, the house felt too clean. The porch light threw moth shadows onto the window and they looked like hands, like the faint prints moths leave on bulbs. We left the TV on for noise. Every car that went past made Dad twitch his head. We changed the safe word 3 times and wrote it down and then tore it in half just for the feeling. He stayed up until my breathing evened out and then I woke once to him standing in the doorway, watching the hall like there would be tracks you could see. I still wait for him sometimes beneath that same flag. There are more parents now. The office put a woman at the desk with a bright scarf who waves like a lighthouse. The janitors propped the doors wide open and nod at me. Officer Alvarez came by and asked me to show the freshmen where the cameras were, like I was a tour guide for the visible. On clear days, the lot smells like sun on rubber. On rainy days, it smells like pennies. The copper light still comes regardless of the weather, and the moths still love it. And shadows still act like they have their own plans. 2 weeks later, I got an unknown text while I was in geometry, a number with no name. It was a photo taken in that same copper light, from the corner by the maintenance shed. You can see me under the flag, shoulders up against the chill. My backpack between my sneakers, the bench empty beside me. In the glass of the office door behind me, there's a soft reflection of a figure in blue. The chest is a pale oval, and where the number should be, there is only shine. There was no caption. There didn't need to be. I deleted it and then it was in the deleted folder like a ghost, and I deleted it again and it still felt present. The way a smell lives in your shirt. Dad switched to picking me up at the side entrance near the band room. Sometimes he is early and sits with the engine off and watches the doors. Sometimes he is late and I watch the lot and feel the temperature change. The way the place has weather, the way it can turn. When a gray sedan goes by on the road out front with a little antenna and a nudge bar, my whole body goes tight and then relaxes when the driver looks ordinary and bored. It is a strange thing to be proud of your fear. It keeps you alive and it keeps you awake. The worst part isn't the moment I screamed or the moment he moved. It's the moment before, when he said my name with the sound of someone who had practiced, who had been here, who had watched long enough to know which bench you choose and which pocket holds your phone. It's the way the badge shone with no numbers, like a coin rubbed smooth by too many hands. Some nights I dream he steps out again and tries a different name, a different school, a different child. In the dream, the radio voice is always a little too clean. In the dream, the moths smack themselves to exhaustion against the lights and the lights keep humming, and the person watching knows exactly when the weather will change.